Hello everyone. Namaste Adab Sat Sri Akal. A very good afternoon to one and all. I am Sarva Rajpal, web ecosystem consultant at Google, working with top Indian websites to make sure the web is in a healthy state. Many of you might have already worked with me in the past, and if you were already bored enough of seeing me, luckily I'm going to be the host for the day as well. Cheers. Well, jokes aside, it makes me immensely happy to welcome you all today at the Web Dev Partner Forum India, a platform for the partners and by the partners. Hence, I would like to thank and congratulate all of you for already contributing to the success of this event. Just like our audience, that is you all, today's agenda looks amazing too. The format of this event is unique as our partners are coming and sharing with you their experiences on all the web capabilities and tools they have adopted to see success. The slides presented today are owned by the respective partners and views expressed are theirs only. Content is relatable, super action packed, and very crisp. I'm personally super excited and charged up and looking forward to seeing how the things unfold today. Hence, not wasting any extra second further, let me ask Dion, Director of Web Ecosystems team at Google, to kickstart the proceedings with his opening note. Over to you, Dion.
Thank you, and Namaste, India. Welcome and thanks so much for all of you that are joining us today. You know, it's particularly unusual times, I understand, but I'm really glad that we can host you at least digitally and share some of the exciting content that we've got lined up, content that we, some of which we just delivered at web.dev Live just a month ago, and a lot of great stuff that's going to be coming from partners that have been doing amazing things on the web. So yeah, I'm really sorry that we're not together in person here. I actually love getting to India at least once a year. Last time I was here for this for the Google for Mobile event, where I mentioned my love of cricket. Here's me playing with my brother, and I was particularly bummed that the IPL was cancelled this year because I love watching that. It's very exciting. I also, of course, love your food. The national dish in England is an Indian dish. But the event was really exciting to me because there's just a lot of energy that comes from developers and partners in India. And we kind of saw that in full force as we were looking at doing office hours and the like. So sorry that we can't be over in India chatting together, but at least thanks to the internet and the web, we can meet and chat about what's going on. Because I think the word unprecedented has been used an unprecedented number of times. And, we've all been dealing with being in various lockdowns and just massive kind of disruptions to our life, working from home, dealing with parenting, education, you name it. We've all been dealing with things in our own kind of unique way. And we've seen a bunch of trends emerging on the web. Like there's been this significant increase in media usage, kind of obviously around the globe, but very much so in India itself. And it's been actually really nice to see the web being used in these times and being able to serve more businesses and users. Now, it's also great to see that the web's a great choice for e-commerce companies. Like, it was nice being able to buy goods without having to go into the stores for a while there and continues to be so. And we saw this interesting trend of e-commerce companies really using the web as a way to get consumers maybe using this for the first time, being able to do that first kind of online purchase, getting groceries and the like. Flipkart, of course, always pioneering here. And they talked about how they see the web as a great way to get their next 200 million customers. So I've been excited to see that. And then on the publishing side, news is more important than ever. We want to make sure people can get up-to-date information, as well as just, pure entertainment and the like too. And news publishers and content creators are seeing a big surge in traffic as well, along with the media folks. And so we saw this with, large growth here, significant growth of 85% for Jagrant New Media. And then CMSs that power a lot of this content, such as Readware, are seeing a lot more investment and interest from publishers too. So that's been great to see. Content is a key cornerstone on the web. Now, to help our community bring the best of the platform to their ever-increasing user base, we hosted the community last month, as I mentioned, with this web.dev live event. We would, again, love to have been able to have Google I.O. And get folks together, but this was actually a really nice, inclusive way to get people from all around the world just kind of helping, supporting each other as we go through this. And when we look at our actual audience of Web Dev Live, folks from India were the largest segment. And it was really interesting to see that this happened across the 3 days that we ran this event. We ran it on different time zones to try and be able to reach people. Developers from India came across all 3 days. So really appreciate the folks that came kind of in the wee hours of the night to be with us. So over these 3 days, like I said, we kind of traveled to different time zones. And today we hope to kind of capture some of the themes through our partners, because you're all kind of putting this to the test in the real world. And I think we can all learn a lot from each other. But before we get to the partner sessions, I just want to do a quick little recap of some of the highlights that we went through last month. Now, first up is Web Vitals. Now, these are the essential metrics for a healthy site. We're always talking about different metrics and different things on how to measure your experience and how to measure, obviously, your business metrics and how they tie together. And we want to make this as simple as possible for anyone that's building a website to really understand what they can do to make their experience great. And so we've focused on an initial core set of Web Vitals, and they're trying to measure the different important parts of actually a great user experience. We're starting this year with a focus on particular loading of a website and its different phases. And over time, we're really looking to kind of expand this to capture everything we can on what makes a great experience. So the key vitals that we shared and talked about this time around with Core Web Vitals were on the loading phase, being able to get the largest contentful paint. So what's the most important thing that you want your users to see, and how do you get that to them as quickly as possible? Then we have interactivity, and we have this first input delay. So when a user interacts with your site, you need to react to it. And so how are we making sure we're doing that? And then we have kind of the stability of the interface. No one likes it when you're about to click on something and things move on the screen and it gets janky. And so that's what CLS is all about. And we've set up different thresholds where you can work out how well you're doing for your users. Now, we want to make sure that any effort that you put into metrics, you get the kind of biggest bang for the buck. And so one of the important things that we're trying to do is kind of reuse these core metrics in as many places as possible. And we're really excited to see our friends in Google Search. They announced this new search ranking signal, page experience, that's all about using these core web vitals as a key part of them understanding that this is a really important user experience. So if you invest in this, search is going to be recognizing that too. Now, timing here is interesting. Again, we don't want to kind of shock the ecosystem with everything that's going on with coronavirus, but we wanted to kind of get this out there that this is coming. You're going to be hearing more from search on the timing, but it's kind of prudent to start investing in this to be ready for that too. But we're excited that lots of different folks are kind of really honing in on the same metrics for you. And we obviously want to make sure that you can track things across all of our tools. So we wanted to go through, we've got a rich set of tooling from the lab to the field. We want to make sure that you're able to see these key metrics as soon as possible and immediately. So you're able to kind of track and make progress. And we're excited about having that ready. So next up, I want to talk about a new initiative called the Tooling Report. We know that developers spend a lot of their time in build tooling. And there's this, process at the moment where you do your development and then you want to optimize it for production. And this is an area where we actually think there's a big bang for the buck in getting a great experience, kind of tying back to Web Vitals and the like, but just in general, just helping developers be productive. So at Web Dev Live, we launched this website, Tooling Report, that's trying to help you kind of understand what's the right tool, maybe for your next project, maybe it makes sense to even migrate from what you're going on, or maybe just optimizing what you have to make sure it can deliver the best output possible. So we went through and wrote a whole bunch of tests to kind of go through each different important build tool like Browserify, Parcel, Rollup, and Webpack, very popular open source tools. We worked with the folks that build these tools and their community to make sure that we're all holding it right and making sure it's representative, and then kind of making sure we got the right best practices. So how do you get code splitting? How do you get your bundle sizes down? We kind of codified all of these different things to make it so you can understand how these tools do, but also importantly, how you can configure it. And actually, it's really interesting in that you can look at the tests and kind of see how to do this work. So it's really nice to be able to just go in. It's all open source. It's all on GitHub. It's a great source of documentation for you as you're working out how to optimize your builds. Okay, now let's switch over to chatting about what's new in our various web developer tools. And let's start with Chrome DevTools, the tool that most of our developers kind of live in day by day. And if you're used to using DevTools, you find yourself in the console often. And when you're in that console, you may have noticed, or your developers may have noticed, that there's a lot going on. Normally in your application, this is a place for you to kind of debug, write out some information. Different third parties are doing it. And it just gets to be very, very verbose. And so we noticed this and wanted to kind of call out the core main issues into their own area. So we've created an issues tab that allows us to kind of put a highlight on the things that we think are most important, the things that you should really know. So as you kind of quickly are going through your website, you can see major things that are going on. And we focus a lot on privacy. So we can tell you that if there's a change coming in Chrome, something's happening, we can alert you right away. And you can see the message that's going in, and then you can go in to the issues panel. Now, we talked about Web Vitals. We want to make sure that you can track them across all of the key products, including, of course, DevTools here. So now in the timeline, we're calling out exactly when these metrics are kicking off. Now, one kind of fun thing that's a little bit close to home, my 10-year-old son actually has a color vision deficiency. And, within DevTools, we're always looking at how best to emulate the real environment. And then in this case, how your users perceive it. So we have an emulation tool now where you can go through and kind of customize for different vision deficiencies, which are always kind of on a spectrum, and just kind of experience your website and web application in that manner. So you can catch things where like the contrast is off and kind of fix things up to make sure you can be as inclusive as possible with delivering your applications. Now, moving on from DevTools to Lighthouse, which you can run obviously through DevTools itself, but it also runs across a lot of our different surfaces. We announced version 6.0 at web.dev live. And obviously, we want to make sure everything maps well together. So we've taken core web vitals, new audits, and a new performance score and kind of packaged it all together and made sure that we're aligning all of our work. So there's a performance score that always comes with Lighthouse. And when we come up with a new version, we tend to tweak the score a little bit. And to be honest, this can sometimes cause some anxiety when you kind of see your score changing. But the key here is that we want to mimic the real world as best as possible. So obviously, when you're building a site, what's important isn't your Lighthouse score for the sake of the Lighthouse score. It's using Lighthouse to make your user experience better. And so this time around with version 6, we added the core web vital measurements, which obviously makes sense to bake in there. And then we actually removed some of the others to make way for them. So it's not, kind of too much going on in your face, and also optimize for the things that we see have the biggest effect on user experience. So first meaningful paint, first CPU idle, max potential, FID, these things have been moved out. We've made room for core web vitals. And we've also listened to feedback, so time to interactive, and its importance has been kind of brought down a little bit. It's still an important piece, and it does tie well to FID, but we've kind of tweaked the scoring as appropriate here. Now, there's also a slew of new audits. A lot of these audits are focused on JavaScript analysis. We want you to be able to go deeper in analyzing how your JavaScript is working and the effect that it has, and also accessibility. So we're constantly trying to add new audits to give you more insights by running your application. Now, you've done all of this work, you've used these tools, you've tuned your application, things are looking great. Once you've done that hard work, you obviously want to keep it that way. You want to keep it fast. You want to keep it running really well. And so this is where Lighthouse CI comes in. It's been updated to the latest version 6, of course, and it enables you to easily measure your core web vitals on pull requests before they're merged and deployed. So now your developers can constantly be making changes, and you're going to be aware immediately if anything is causing a regression. So this is really important, something that we recommend everyone kind of sets up. Okay, so that's tooling. Now let's move on to another really, really important area, something that I think we're all thinking a lot about these days, which is critical updates on how we're working with the community to make the web more private and more secure. So again, when coronavirus kind of kicked in, we were halfway through a migration on this same site cookie change. And we were stuck a little bit on like, what do we do here? We're thinking in the mode of like, how do we make sure we're not as being disruptive to web developers and partners at a time where they really need to focus on their business in Corona, and maybe there's getting resilience set up and things of that nature. And so we temporarily kind of froze that rollout. However, we've started to get it back on track again, because a lot of the changes that we have here, again, are all about user safety and their privacy. And unfortunately, we've seen that in Corona times, some people have been opportunistic as they've seen the increased use of users doing things on the web, and they're trying to do more to kind of attack that. So we started to really get back on this and turn this on again. If this is a little bit new to you, this is what a modern cookie looks like these days. It's got some funny things in, like this _host piece to the cookie name and the like. We're really trying to give you the ability to set up the right isolation semantics as we set up our web applications, working with third parties, working with first parties and the like. And there's a lot more that we covered about privacy. This is a really kind of fascinating space at the moment as we set up the right primitives for isolation. So while we're working hard to keep our users together, collectively safe, and keep their data private, we also know that we need to continue to make more capabilities to deliver the best possible user experience for your users. And that's where Progressive Web Apps and Fugu come in. Project Fugu is basically an umbrella project for lots of new capabilities that we're delivering that enable your web apps to do more with the native devices that they're running on. And of course, we continue to improve on PWA capabilities as well, which enable web experiences that really feel like apps. And they're able to run from the home screen. The most loyal users can install them, and you can deliver a great experience for these loyal customers. And many of the best PWAs that we see actually come from your region. We also see a lot of hybrid use, which we've made a lot easier with this bubble wrap project, where you can take PWA content and seamlessly reuse it inside of Android apps if you have those too. So that's a lot of information that we kind of ran through quickly in the recap there. We've got a lot of sessions. They were all recorded. They're all available at web.dev live. Excited for you if there's anything that was kind of interesting that piqued your interest here to kind of go deep and go into those sessions, and excited to hear any questions and thoughts you have. But meanwhile, I hope you enjoy today's webinar to hear some of the best practices and how they're getting implemented by our partners in the real world, and learn about some of the challenges that they, and I'm sure you do also, kind of face as you build these great modern web experiences. Thank you so much for being here with me, and enjoy the rest of the event.
Thanks a lot, Dion, for sharing that super quick recap of all the new and exciting things announced during the web.dev live. While your love for Indian food and IPL makes us aware of how Indian you are at heart, taking this presentation at 8 a.m. certainly speaks about how much you appreciate the Indian partners and their amazing work on the web. So thanks again. Before we move on, I wanted to take a moment and provide you a sneak peek of our much awaited Q&A with these amazing Googlers joining us from across the globe. Thanks for sending in tons of questions already, and watch out for the answers to those questions towards the end of this event after our partners talks are done. As Dion mentioned towards the end of his presentation, Chrome is very committed to work with the community and make the web more private and secure. We were amazed to see how positive the same site cookies update was received by a lot of website owners. But of course, there are possibly a lot of unanswered questions as well, which are baffling many at the moment. Well, who doesn't want to make sure that they're hearing from the best in the industry? So on that note, next up we have a panel discussion on how to manage web privacy, a topic which is close to everyone's heart due to its importance and is yet very less discussed about, often due to its complexity. So for asking all the tough questions, we have Monisha from the Google Partnerships team with us as the moderator. And braving those questions, we have Kawaljit Singh Bedi, CPTO NDTV, and Ashish Jaswal, CTO Times Internet. So Monisha, here you go.
Thanks, Saurabh, for that introduction. Welcome to Kawaljit and Ashish from two different companies in India today, two of our partners. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on this panel. I look forward to having a conversation with you for the next 15 minutes or so on a topic that's top of mind for a lot of publishers as well as other companies. So diving straight into the first question. Privacy is top of mind, both from a user perspective, but also from a regulatory perspective as governments respond to user needs on privacy. How is your organization thinking about it? What's the top line summary? And what are the things that concern you? Ashish, maybe if you want to answer first.
Sure. I would say we take our users' privacy seriously, and we are committed to provide them all the right information on what data do we collect, how do we use that, and obviously keeping in mind the recent privacy laws which is coming in GDPR and CCPA kind of stuff. We also started giving users the preferences or options, we would say, on what data they want to provide and what not. So it's like completely transparent. Keeping in mind and expecting that more such privacy laws will come in. So we are kind of planning better in terms of how to tackle them in a seamless fashion in future. For example, can this be a process, part of the platform which we offer to make it more seamless across our products?
Thank you. Kawaljit, anything different you may be doing at NDTV or any other views on how your organization is tackling it?
Yeah, I mean, as a news organization, we actually don't collect too much user information today. It's mostly, read only, so to say. People come, consume content and go. At best, we collect email IDs, but like Ashish said, we provide all the information on what the collection, if any, is for. We try to keep it, visible and upfront on when we do collect anything. But we do realize that we have partners and advertising on our sites which could be collecting things that we don't keep a track of. So that's what I think for us as an organization we have started thinking of, that for our users who come to our site, the expectation is the same that we bring in for our advertisers as well. So that's what we think about today. But other than that, we take privacy seriously. And like Ashish mentioned, it's very clear to our users what we do with our data.
That's great news. I have a question on how the organization is tackling it. So obviously privacy is a topic that affects different departments, I assume, in your company. It touches the lives of the people in marketing, definitely the tech teams, possibly even the editorial. So how are you tackling it from an organizational perspective? Have you set up a new team? Are you thinking of forming a cross-functional team? How are you tackling it from an org perspective?
If I take it first, go ahead, Ashish.
Sure. Times being a bigger organization, I think we have multiple products, as you know. So it's not just a tech team and editorial team. I think it's probably multiple products as well. So multiple product teams also. What we have done is, what we realize is that obviously solving it via having a central team probably is too complicated and what might not work too effectively. So while we have a central team which guides and make sure that we audit all the processes properly, I think we have, I would say, leaders in every product and teams who represent their teams and are kind of taking it forward and taking the right policies which is defined by central and implementing in their products. This way, I think we have figured out how to use the learnings across different products and teams, and probably the model works better for us.
Fantastic. Kawaljit?
Yeah, for us, sure. We don't have a, let's say, a chief privacy officer, so to say, who keeps an oversight of all the data that is collected by us. But certainly the way the data is collected today is handled by very few teams today who have access to it. The access is given on the basis of what their requirements are. I think what we want to do going forward would be to make sure the same data, when used by different teams across the organizations, everyone knows why they are being used across functions also. So for example, if we have collected email IDs for, let's say, a newsletter, we want to make sure our marketing team does not use it to send marketing advice to those email IDs because they were collected for a very specific use case. When we want to plan using those email IDs, I think opt-in is the right way to do it. We want our users and consumers to know what we collected for and let them know. I think as and when we start collecting more private data, that's where the need for a chief privacy officer comes in. And I think we are heading towards a world where the consumers' demand for how their data is being consumed by larger organizations or companies like ours is made a little more upfront, and that information is given in a simpler way to our users. It shouldn't be hidden in some deep-rooted terms and conditions. It should be very clear both at the time of signing up, and if the user has signed up, a good way for them to know what we know of them, and ways for them to expunge the data if they want that. I think this is what we internally discussed now. This is what we want our teams across the organization also to know, that this is how we're going to use the data of our consumers.
Thank you for that. It's great that you guys are actually thinking this through and debating it internally in your organizations. And you have some time, at least from a Chrome perspective, right? But one of the more immediate changes that Chrome put out through the privacy sandbox was the news about the third-party cookies and the need to label your first-party cookies and your third-party cookies as part of the same-site cookie changes. How has that been received by the organization? Are there any concerns around this, especially on the monetization front?
So I think, so we have been also observing the changes which are coming across. I think third-party cookie change you are referring to is the same site cookie change, which probably rolled out in Feb. And I think that is for good. I mean, the way we see that is that at least gives option to developers to rightly tag their cookies, what they want to share with whom and how they want to share with third parties. So, and we were quick in rolling that out. And in fact, it had helped us in probably a positive way in making sure what cookies are used for what purpose, and probably enhancing the user privacy in a sense. I think we are also actively looking into the upcoming proposals, which I think different web communities are discussing. That is primarily about how to share the data, privacy vault, first-party sets, etc. I think we have been keeping an eye and close watch on that to make sure how it's going to impact us or what kind of changes we need to do once those proposals actually goes into reality.
Yeah. Great point on the community discussing stuff. We'll come to that in a minute. But Kawaljit, any thoughts on the latest announcements around same-site cookies?
Yeah, I think if I can just look at it a broader view, sites like ours, which are monetized only through advertising, very little subscription-based revenue for us, targeting users with the relevant advertising is really important. I think no one wants to see ads which are not relevant to them. Like if you keep targeting something you are not interested in, even for the user and for publishers, it's just a blind spot. You lose the user over time, you lose revenues over time. So I think third-party cookies allowed you to do that, target users based on their behavior. But in this privacy world, I think there was too much power with advertisers on knowing the customers. they could track the customers across sites, could figure out their behavior and patterns. I think with Chrome deciding to move away from allowing third-party cookies, and thankfully it's a well thought of plan of at least doing or giving it 2 years to do it instead of some other browsers which abruptly shut it overnight. I think it just makes sense for all of us to be ready on how to continue serving the right kind of advertising to our consumers without any ways of breaching their privacy. So we really want people to know that their privacy is protected, and yet target them with the right advertising. I think the approach that Chrome and some other browsers are taking for this, which is phasing out third-party cookies, which are actually intrusive and gives too much power to advertisers, and yet coming up with ways to target users based on their behavior and not certainly from knowing more than what their interests are. I think that's a very good way to think about it. Some of the ideas around privacy sandbox, which we may talk about later, also actually targets those kind of use cases where we disallow advertisers from knowing the customers. I think some of the protection has to be provided both by the publishers and the browsers, and yet not let the consumers be targeted with just frivolous ads which have no meaning. I think it's a good balance that Chrome and some of the other browsers are taking to approach this.
Thank you. That's great feedback. So on the way in which you can participate in the process, right? Both of you mentioned the privacy sandbox and the communities that are discussing this. So there is, the web standards process allows you to engage in online forums like GitHub to specifically speak up about the use cases that, are important to your business. Have you guys participated in these forums, joined these forums, or said anything in these forums? Do you intend to? Is that something that you plan to do going forward?
Yes. So I think we have certainly a part of these forums. Have we participated or probably communicated? Probably not yet. I think what we have been doing so far is observing these changes which are coming along. We have been following all the discussions which are happening. And we have an internal team actually who is primarily working on these upcoming changes to understand the impacts and what all internal use cases will get impacted or to be tweaked. We certainly think that in upcoming time, I think we are planning to discuss our changes or our use cases openly with the forums as well, try to and raise our concerns around the upcoming changes, or probably learn from the community on how to handle them better.
Fantastic. Thank you. Kawaljeet?
We recently joined both the communities at both GitHub and W3C. I think we are in the mode of actually trying to get a sense of where this is going. I think for us, like I said, because we are mostly a read-only kind of site where we don't collect too much private information, it didn't impact us immediately versus, let's say an e-commerce site or sites which collect user data. For that reasons, while we recently joined, but I think the impact probably will be greater to us as third-party cookies get phased out. So we are actively now going through the propositions and suggestions which have come not just from companies like Google and Firefox and Brave, but also from the communities, from the publishers, from other companies who do get affected. I think it's a healthy discussion going on. Some of the suggestions already on the table are looking already really good, ways to tackle these issues. I think what we are trying to now do is onboard our sales teams and the real people who go and sell on the ground, the impact that they will have when third-party cookies go out. So they are active participants to these communities now internally from NDTV. And we hope to participate more, give our suggestions as we run into the kind of issues we may face as a publisher, and we'll contribute it. It's good to see that it's such an open community and such a wide range of companies participating in it. I think it's a good, healthy sign of an ecosystem which wants to tackle this issue.
Fantastic. It's really encouraging to see how both of you have invested so heavily, as an organization in privacy. I'm going to end with one final question, which is a little bit philosophical and high level, so you're allowed your personal opinions as well. So as we've discussed, privacy is not just about browser policies. It's also about the regulatory landscape. It's about what the users want. And so given all these factors, do you think that the web must inevitably evolve to be private by default? Do you think that's something that's good for the web overall, the health of the web?
I would say, given the fact that, as we already discussed, given the fact that there are too many things or open ways you can collect data, I think privacy by default, from a user perspective, is always a right thing. And so to the point that privacy by default, from a browser perspective, is certainly a good thing. I think browsers have to play a key role in making sure that how they can maintain they can solve for the privacy for the user, but at the same time, not to impact the web usability. I think that is a key challenge which browsers are figuring out, as we have been talking about in different forums, what APIs to allow, how we can still maintain the usability of the web, which is a key concern. But certainly, I would agree that by default, privacy is a right way to go.
Thank you. Kawaljeet?
I think the internet thrived the way it started being public. I think that probably is the right way to go, but I think the awareness of how much information about users out there, most people don't know. I mean, even if you don't sign up to a site, even if you use a private browser, I think most people don't realize how good technology is to still track you. For example, and this is something technologists know, that your battery level of your phone, the orientation of how you hold it, all these are markers to show who you are, even if you don't give any information as you move across the web. So they can keep a track of you, and in no way to scare anyone, but even if you try to be private, there are ways for companies to track you. So if browsers and apps and the ecosystem comes around to offer privacy, which safeguards a user's information, I think you could have an open and public internet, but I think that's a very hard challenge to solve. There are always ways to get around it. So I think, and like you rightly said, it's more of a personal opinion. I think by default, it being private is probably the right way to do it. And as people get the awareness that what kind of information could be out there, let them by choice be more public. Let them let their information be out there if they choose to volunteer it. I think by default, the more private we are, the safer the internet would be at this point.
Thank you, Kawaljeet. It sounds like you're calling for a bit of a reset, to set expectations all around, and then we can evolve to a more open web when we're ready for it, perhaps. I'm afraid that's all we have time for today, but thank you so much for spending time with us, being so open and honest about how you're thinking this through. I know we have some time, at least on the Chrome side, to investigate what the changes are and to be prepared for them as they come through over the next couple of years. But you guys have given us good insight into how your organizations are dealing with it, how you're thinking it through, from all sorts of perspectives. So thank you for that. And back to Saurabh.
Thanks a lot, Monisha, Kawaljeet, and Ashish for this enlightening panel discussion. A humble reminder that you can all add your questions right below the screen on the events page link. Questions you probably already had, or maybe the questions that came up while watching any of the sessions today. We'd get them answered by a panel of Googlers in Q&A session towards the end. Now, since we're running a bit behind schedule, I'd skip my 2-page long prepared introduction for our next amazing speaker and keep it very short. He's a principal engineer at Nykaa and is someone who makes sure Nykaa's mobile website doesn't forget to take the vital dosage of critical performance upgrades before every release. A very warm welcome to you, Sunit. Over to you.
Hey guys, this is Sunit Jindal. I'm part of Nykaa's engineering team, and today I'm here to talk on the topic of why Web Vitals are a critical perf dosage for every website. But before we jump on to Web Vitals, let's discuss briefly how performance measurement was done prior to Web Vitals landed into Lighthouse 2. Lighthouse is one of the most popular tools that is used across globe by web developers to perform synthetic monitoring of the content. And Lighthouse has total 6 metrics using which the performance score of your site is calculated. Two of the metrics, that is first contentful paint and first meaningful paint, are concerned how quickly content is rendered on your page. We have another metric which is concerned with the visual progress of content on the pages, that is known as speed index. Speed index is still part of the latest version of Lighthouse tool. We have some other metric as well which tells you about how busy your main thread is. It could be due to too much JavaScript that is being loaded on the page. Core Web Vitals landed into Lighthouse with the arrival of version 6. Total 3 new metrics were added. The first one is LCP, that is largest contentful paint. As the name suggests, this metric is concerned with the time at which the largest content is painted on the screen within the viewport of your device. The second metric is cumulative layout shift, which is concerned with the visual stability of the content. CLS can be positive or negative. That is, if you are showing some content initially and all of a sudden removing that content from the page without user interaction, that could lead to a negative CLS. It is recommended to keep your CLS under 0.1 for any page. The third core Web Vital metric is first input delay, which signifies the delay in when user interacts with the page. This interaction could be scrolling or clicking on a button or a link. If you look at the Lighthouse report on the screen, you won't find FID in these metrics. This is because TBT, which is a proxy metric for FID, is used in Lighthouse 6. And on the arrival of Core Web Vitals in V6, we saw our score taking a big hit. Our scores were consistently in higher 80s, but when Web Vitals came, our score dropped to lower 60s. That was a pretty tough time for us because we just recently fixed the performance of the site. We had a great score, and all of a sudden there are these new metrics which negatively impacted our score. So post our surprise and phase of being scared and confused, we invested some time to understand these Web Vitals. The key points of Web Vitals that we understood are: prioritize the content in viewport. If there's usually it has been a best practice or recommendation to load above the fold content first, but sometimes you have to load extra data as well in below the fold as well. But even if you are doing that, please ensure that you are loading content which is in the upper section of your above the fold area. Ensure visual stability. If there is some content that needs to be loaded later, please ensure that you at least put a placeholder so that there are no surprises in terms of shifting content on the page. These placeholders also act as an indication for end users that some content will be loaded soon. And third, and the most important point, is Core Web Vitals give emphasis on the field data as well. FID is one such metric, that is first input delay. To gather your data regarding FID, you can use Chrome User Experience Report. And the great part about Core Web Vitals is, though these metrics are new, but the documentation surrounding these Core Web Vitals is already mature. To read about Core Web Vitals, you can go to web.dev/vitals. They even have articles for each and every Core Web Vital, how you can optimize your website or pages to improve your score. The important thing to understand here is the score represents user experience. So the importance of fixing your score is to improve user experience on your site. Post understanding what exactly we needed to do to again get a better score, we set out to make few changes on our site. So the points that I'm going to discuss were which we did specifically to improve our score for Web Vitals. We already had a good score in Lighthouse 5.6 that was in high 80s. So these are the changes that we did to again get a good score. So if you think about it, the first call that you make to the servers for HTML content delays or impacts the entire life cycle of the page. If the HTML that you requested for the page is delayed or is received in 1 second, each and every metric is going to be impacted. The second change that we did was set higher priority to above the fold images. You can do this by setting either loading equal to eager in your images or setting preload tag in the header for those images. By doing this particular change, we were able to reduce our LCP by nearly 400 milliseconds. Reducing DOM nodes. So DOM nodes impact the total time required to parse or render content on your page, since browser has to prepare a DOM tree as well CSS home for your styles. If you're able to restrict the number of DOMs, you'll be and just shipping the critical CSS, you'll be able to improve your initial render times. Better compression and chunking of assets. Now, a lot of cost in order to improve the performance of your site, you have to make improvements on many fronts. For example, you have to improve or reduce your JavaScript so that your main thread is not busy too much. Reason being, if your main thread is occupied and during that time users tries to interact, that might lead to delay in the response since the main thread is busy. Similarly, another front is your network, where you download a lot of data and it is significant, especially for users visiting your site for the first time. By improving the compression that we used for our HTML and JavaScript files, we were able to reduce the cost of network. Another big change that we did on our site was we started implementing lightweight implementation for third-party scripts. Some of the third-party scripts were quite bulky and they were competing for processing power equivalent to our first-party code. By making these changes, we were able to reduce nearly 700 KB of uncompressed JavaScript from our pages. This again helped us reduce the network cost for the user, as well as it ensured that the page become interactive sooner. And last but not the least, efficient lazy loading of the content. We realized that on our home page we were loading 4x more images than what were required. By fixing this particular bug, we were able to again reduce the network bandwidth that was required for our site to be functional. Post these changes, what did we achieve? So these changes were released in phases as we were learning, and we saw that certain changes improved our score, certain changes improved only the score on lower end devices. So our score went from lower 60s to higher 60s into 70s and 80s, and finally we were able to achieve a score of 93. Now, the important thing to understand about this score is this score may vary over time, and the score might also vary depending on what page you are opening. For example, your home page or product listing page or product description page can very well have different scores. Reason being, these pages have different kind of content. For example, pages with larger images like home page, which is usually filled with a lot of images, ensure you are loading optimized images. For product pages, split your page into above the fold and below the fold content. This will also ensure that you are shipping only JavaScript which is needed for above the fold, as well as styles which are needed for critical rendering only. Also, across the pages, ensure that DOM nodes are in check, which means try to keep your DOM nodes less than 1500. For our case, we have noticed when we keep our DOM nodes less than 1000 on the page, even on low-end devices, the rendering is super smooth. Now let's discuss about the real world as well. These are the screenshots that we gathered from Chrome User Experience Report. We were able to see consistent improvement in our CLS score month over month. We did some major improvements in our Lighthouse, in our performance in the month of July, and that data is expected to land in second week of August. Same was the case for LCP. We saw consistent improvements in our LCP score as well. By ensuring the LCP is in the green zone, we are ensured that the user is able to consume relevant data sooner. And similar is the case with first input delay. First input delay is the third core web vital, which is presented in Lighthouse tool by the proxymetric DBT. As you can see, there's minor, but it's still improvement in the score of FID as well. So that's all from my side. Have a nice day. Thank you.
Thanks, Sunit, for providing us with such a wonderful dosage of Web Vitals. It's been an amazing journey for Nika to have come this far in terms of web performance. Many congratulations to the entire team behind it. Well, now moving on to our next segment, we have a very interesting topic, frameworks. During my 7+ years of development experience, I've always had this question about which framework is the best one to use. Now, after 2.5 years of consulting experience, I certainly know I was not alone, and this is a question which everyone is trying to find an answer for. Well, there is no direct answer to that, but this session aims to give you some insights about how the frameworks perform in the real world and what are the few performance optimization techniques you can apply for some of the famous frameworks, which you probably would be using too. While I briefly touch base upon the framework insights for India and quickly share a few things about Angular, we have Ashok Vishwakarma with us from Naukri.com, who'd share his learnings for React optimizations, and Abhinash from GoIbigo, who'd surprise us with a new framework which they built in-house and are now open sourcing it. Fun fact, they use this framework with super many best practices built in for Arogya Setu app. So hold your seats tight and get ready for the fun-filled session. First, let me very quickly share some insights from India. This is the breakdown of frameworks in terms of sites using it within India. We can clearly see that React, Vue, and AngularJS are the top 3 JS frameworks that are being used. We excluded GSAP, Handlebars, and Required.js from here because they aren't actually full-fledged frameworks. Now let's have a very quick look at the ranking of India in the global setup for React websites. We'll be using the 3 core web vital metrics, which Sunit explained about a bit earlier, and for which we already have tons of material available on web.dev website as well. There were some really cool sessions on it during the WebDev Live event, which happened towards the end of June, and the videos are available on demand on the Chrome Developers YouTube channel. So do make sure to check them out. Well, coming back to the rankings. Speaking of the very bad metrics and ranking of India globally, you can see that India is ranking 3rd for LCP, 6th for FID, and 5th for CLS globally. Speaking of good metrics, India is not even in top 10 for LCP, and 3rd for FID and 3rd for CLS. I hope this clearly indicates that we in India aren't doing a very great job in building optimized websites using React. But in fact, that's not the case for just React, it's a case for all other frameworks too. Speaking of the top 3, Here's a quick comparison. As you can see, all React, Angular, and Vue more or less perform the same way, with very minute differences here and there on certain metrics. This means when mapped globally, Indian websites, irrespective of which framework is being used, aren't very well optimized for their audience type. Well, one can argument that India has slower internet connections as compared to the rest of the world. But that's the answer to your question itself. You got to optimize and ship the code according to your user types, and hence which frameworks can enable you to chunk the code properly or easily make your efforts easy to achieve optimization should be your main focus. Speaking of which, I want to quickly talk about Angular. First and foremost, it is important to understand that AngularJS is not same as Angular. I know it's a common misconception, and hence I wanted to point this out aloud. AngularJS is a JavaScript-based open source front-end framework and is mainly used to develop single-page applications on web. And most importantly, applications built with AngularJS are not mobile-friendly as well, as a lot of mobile browsers don't support it. Now you get the answer of why AngularJS was not performing at par, and you could see that it still had a lot of improvement areas. But that's what I want to say, that if you're building your website for mobile, make sure that you migrate to Angular and don't stick to AngularJS. On the other hand, Angular is a popular open source JavaScript framework created by Google for developing web applications. Google team themselves use it for over 1,000 projects at Google. It is a module-based framework with many easy-to-build, test, and optimization techniques built in. And on top of that, it is mobile-friendly. One other key difference is that AngularJS code is written in JavaScript, while Angular code is written in TypeScript, which is a more strictly typed language enforcing good coding practices. Not only does Angular come with the Angular CLI, which makes it super easy to kick off a templated application, but it is much easier to maintain it as the source code size increases. Additionally, Angular supports hierarchical dependency injection, while AngularJS doesn't. So, Angular also provides a lot of de facto and configurable ways by which you can easily optimize your Angular website. You can access easy to understand visualization of code dependencies and easily defined asset budgets without any extra efforts. Stephen Fluin, who is a developer advocate at Google, has covered all those aspects of Angular optimization in his talk during web.dev live. I highly recommend you to have a look at that and optimize your Angular websites. But of course, migrate to Angular from AngularJS. Next time when we do this analysis, I want to see Angular there instead of AngularJS. Do also check out the keynote talk by Dion, where he has Vue's creator as his guest, and they discuss about all the goodness which Vue.js has to offer. With this, I pass on the baton to Abhinash from Goibibo, which would be followed up by Ashok from Naukri.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Saurav. Hi, everyone. I'm Abhinash. I'm a front-end developer with Goibibo, and today I'm here to talk to you about Stencil, our in-house framework. Mostly the journey leading up to it and our learnings from the whole process. We just wanted to share it across the network. Before we begin, let me just set up some quick context about Goibibo in terms of who we are and how things look like on our side. If any of you are not aware, Goibibo is an online booking platform offering multiple services like flights, hotels, trains, cabs, bus, etc. We have multiple teams working on each of these services, enhancing their experience with their own production setup, their own deployment pipelines, and their own code bases. Each of these teams want to have a certain level of autonomy on their own service to ensure speed and growth. So overall, we have a very versatile ecosystem. So then, what's the problem statement here? The problem here is sharing in front-end ecosystem is limited in terms of if you look at how all of the modern UI frameworks have evolved in these times, like React or Angular or Vue, you will see that they have all consolidated into this whole component architecture, which enables us to make highly reusable components and share across teams. But that's pretty much it. When you want to share solutions, like say we have a custom real-time user monitoring solution where we basically profile the web page's interactivity for our end users, how do I share these kind of solutions across teams? Well, there are no real means to do it. The solution was pretty much looking at us. That is, all of these code bases are already using libraries like React or Redux. So then why can't we adopt this whole library convention for our solutions as well? Enter packages. Packages are your text solutions wrapped into library format of sorts, where each of your solution has their own package JSON, declaring its own version control of sorts, declaring its own dependencies and peer dependencies for management, and they are easy to reuse and share across. We wanted to build a framework from the grassroots level that encourages this whole package adoption. And hence we coined something of a fancy term that we call as PDD, package driven development. Mostly what we want is should start looking at your solutions like a package, whether you're trying to build a business solution or you're trying to build a framework level solution. Each of them can go into their own package. We wanted to have a framework which encourages this whole philosophy. But how does your business team actually gains from this? Well, when we started onboarding our business teams onto our framework, we saw some pretty interesting use cases. This is a funny meme that I actually find very funny is once you onboard the whole PDD train, you will start seeing packages anywhere. And believe me, this is going to be true. Well, when we went to our business teams, let's talk about a real world example. You have built a very highly generic and reusable auto suggest component. Any vertical or any business can use them. But how are they actually consuming it? In terms of when a business team is consuming your AutoSist component, AutoSist is basically the search functionality component. So when a team is consuming it, they will be having some kind of fetch API, which gives its return response, which powers the whole AutoSist content. They will have some kind of util which massages this response. They will have some kind of stateful interactions, which basically consumes the user's input. And obviously, they will have some level of client-side analytics, which you want to have from your users' impressions. All of these basically constitute of your business layer. Business layer stands true across platforms, whether it's your desktop, whether it's your mobile, or whether it's your app. Business layer can be or should be reused all around. And that is the whole package philosophy. When our business team started onboarding into Stencil, what we saw is on the right side, you will see a list of packages like config, utils, APIs, hooks, types, client-side analytics. Anything and everything was getting reused. Shareability boosted like anything. So how will you make something like Stencil? Well, you will need a certain set of opinionated libraries. Like in our case, it was React and Redux, but you need to make sure that these libraries do not bind itself into your framework. These needs to be loosely decoupled because you want to actually plug and play with them. Next, you need to understand what are your prerequisites for your organization. Whether you want to build isomorphic apps or whether you want to build client-side only apps. Is authorization important to you or is authentication important to you? And lastly, you need to have abstraction tying all of this in together. And obviously, you're going to have lots and lots of packages. After taking all of these steps, we reached somewhere which looked like this. These are the grassroots level packages which get our Stencil framework up and running. What you will notice here is we have segregated each of these activities into its own package, right from your request handler at the server side to the app mounting process on the client side, whether it's a low level activity like a network adapter or whether it's a daily activity like an image component. Each is its own package. This brings us a possibility where we can basically scale things up and plug and play whenever we want. Our real testimony came when Arogya Setu, fresh out of its POC phase, came to us as a use case to onboard onto our Stencil platform. We could not simply ship out a React bundle with its own size that it is. We wanted to play with PReact for this particular use case. How do we do that? We just switched out the React modules of our package. Here you can on the list, on the number 2 and 3, you will see Express PReact SSR handler getting slashed by Express React SSR handler, or Mount React app getting swapped with Mount PReact app. And it just simply worked. That is the testimony of the abstraction that you put in place before time to let your framework orchestrate and take up any kind of use cases that you want. There is one particular flow of our Stencil framework that I want to further discuss upon, and that is how we have implemented routing. Routing is completely config driven in Stencil in terms of Businesses will define what their pages want in terms of whether they want to have SSR, that is server-side rendering, whether they want to get cached, whether they want to have some kind of modules like Hotjar to watch them, whether you want to even add Web Vitals tracing. Web Vitals tracing is actually an interesting use case. You see, when Web Vitals got introduced, now it was the crazy new parameter that everybody wanted to trace. But how do we roll this out into an org? Stencil framework gave us the pipeline where we can just enable it at the route config level, and our business team just need to switch it on like a flag, and automatically for all of their pages, these matrices will get captured at an ingestion server. That's what this whole framework config driven approach with packages will give to you. This will allow you to scale up your front-end ecosystem altogether. Now, on the right side of the screen, you will see some of function names, which are kind of self-explanatory, and you will be seeing a mirror to them on the config side as well. These are basically workspaces or life cycles that we call it, that we have set up for our routing. In isomorphic apps, we have seen that if you make a mistake on the server side, your server goes down. To insulate this kind of error fallback, we created these life cycles which satisfy the business team's use cases while making sure that the server never goes down. One particular out of them you can see is a populate store from URL. Obviously, like mentioned earlier, Redux is our go-to state management library. What populate store from URL takes care of is it makes sure that the application never interacts with URL, because when you want to ship your code to an app world, there is no URL actually. So this lifecycle takes care of that any kind of input that you want from the URL and populate your store and get your app booted up gets taken care of in this particular lifecycle. This made us future ready when we wanted to share our application code into apps platform as well. So all in all, these are your takeaways. Do package-driven development, that is, start wrapping up your solutions into packages. Reuse your business layer as much as possible and build config-driven frameworks. On the below, you can find my Twitter handle @LufiaVinas. You can always reach me out if you have any kind of queries. That's all from my side. Thank you.
Hey everyone, my name is Ashok Vishwakarma. I work for Naukri.com as principal architect, and I'm a GD for web technologies as well. In this talk, I'll talk about React and some of the performance things which we have done in Naukri about React. So let's actually get on into it. So the basic building blocks of a React framework is components, and there is two ways we can create components in React, either using a function or either using classes. The class components we try to avoid as much as possible, and the reason being that is because if you want to reuse or make a shareable component which we can share across multiple other components, and that becomes challenging when using classes, because logic can actually split out in multiple lifecycle hooks, and it's also have tend to specific challenges when you want to pull any specific render props or any specific high order component. So these two specifications which we have if you want to reuse the component in terms of states and in terms of lifecycle hooks. So and we have written a specific blog post for that, why function components is important. You can go through in that particular link. React 16's come up with this hooks functionality, which makes function components to be used as similar to the class component as well, and they can have all those states and lifecycle methods available. So this specific link will give you all those specific details you require to understand how function component works and how you can get started with it, along with the benefits you get actually while using function components. The next thing is if your system and your software is already built on classes, I would suggest to use pure component instead of component when you are extending your class component. The reason why pure component is a little bit more performance optimized is because they don't use suit component update and other state changes comparison over there. They use very shallow comparison on the props, and React does that automatically inside the framework itself. So you don't have to worry about managing and changing that when your component should update and when it should not. And those specific complex logic can go directly into the React, and React take care of that logic pretty well. So all you have to do is just use your component, and if possible, most of the time when you are using any callback or any specific object, use memoized callback and memoized objects over there, so that React can know that if anything doesn't change, the callback and the function value doesn't need to be changed that way. The next thing is named functions, and this is also very important if you are using JavaScript as a whole, because most of the time what happens is, because we tend to use that anonymous function in our callbacks, and those anonymous functions needed to be cleared when our event handler is unbinding them, or maybe our specific view is going away. If they are not named, then the memory location of those specific functions are not available, and because of that memory location is not available, javascript so actually JavaScript garbage collector cannot collect them and cannot clear those memories. So this tend to leak memory if you're using anonymous function for all your callbacks. So try to avoid them as much as possible, and if you already have some of your anonymous function in your callbacks, try to make them named functions. The next thing is prop type. Most of the time, we actually develop components and we share those components among multiple teams. And because every team have their own implementation of that particular component, they needed to know that what sort of properties and what sort of methods available for that particular component. And the best way to do that is using prop types. If you mention prop types on your component, it's also get on it's also get the intelligence from the editor, and it also tell them immediately when you're going to type your component name. And apart from that, it also help them on the runtime. So your type check will happens when React is actually running on the browser. We have written a blog post about that how prop type works and why it's important, and why you should keep it. You can go through this particular link to have a better understanding about prop types. SSR and pre-renderers are also one of the most important thing, and because most of the application we work with are pretty large, and if we have some sort of application and some sort of code already developed, and converting them onto the SSR and pre-render is very difficult. So think about these specific things in the beginning of your application and the beginning of your product, if you're going to initiate it. And if you have existing React application, and you want to make it SSR or pre-rendered available, so Next.js would be a really good framework of choice, which we are also using internally. And this helps to use your existing React components or existing React project which you are using, and then put them into a specific container where SSR and pre-render gonna perform. There are other ways you can achieve SSR and pre-render by using Puppeteer, and do a node server proxy to send all your bot requests to that node server, and then the node server gonna use Puppeteer internally and render your application and generate the HTML to actually provide to the bot. So and that have one specific downside, because node is tend to have very CPU inbound, and that will have some of your additional cost on the infra. But if you're using Next.js, is going to be the same application, and you don't have to worry about that much about the infra. The next thing is performance budget. So most of the time, when we develop these applications, we tend to choose and pick libraries from various open source projects, and most of the time we don't know that how much these specific libraries are costing me in terms of initial payload, in terms of total bundle size. So performance budgets would can really help over there if you set performance budgets on your React application, or your build tool. So that will tell you initially that how much this whole specific bundle is going to be, and based on that you can send certain warnings or certain errors depending on what your application and desired bundle size you achieve. In Naukri, we use we use Webpack to actually build our React project, and we have set up a Webpack performance budget recently, and we have written a blog post about that, and you can follow that particular blog post on this particular link. So that's all from my side about React, and thanks a lot.
Thank you, Ashok and Abhinash, for providing all of us with such amazing framework level insights and hacks to make the websites better. That's all the talks for today, folks. With this, we come to an end of today's presentations, and it is time to welcome the Google team to answer all the questions you've asked us already, or maybe posted it right below the screen on your page. So I hope you found the webinar very useful, and your feedback is very, very, very valuable to us. Please see the form appearing on the right here, and let us know how the session went. You may take a moment to fill it up now itself as we're getting ready for the Q&A. And yes, we have the Q&A live with all these amazing Googlers that you all have been waiting to hear from. And I first of all, before moving ahead, I want to welcome all of you here on this Q&A, and thanks for joining us from across the globe. I think we have received a lot of questions beforehand, like people while registering, they had asked few questions. So probably we'll kick off with that. I'll probably be asking you those questions first, and then we'll jump on to some of the questions that we got in the live session as well. And if you are still willing to ask any of the questions from all these amazing Googlers that you see on your screen, feel free to push those questions right now before you forget them. Okay, with that, can I have the first question, please? The question is on Web Vitals, why did Google give preference to LCP over FCP? Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, I think Sam, do you want to take a dig at that?
Yeah, I'll have a go at this. So first, contentful paint, that's FCP, and largest contentful paint, that's LCP, are complementary metrics. But overall, we found that LCP works better as a single indicator of page load performance. So FCP captures the very beginning of how the loading experience feels, whereas LCP provides a signal about how quickly a user is actually able to see the primary or largest content on the page. And FCP could be anything at all loading on the page. It's a good sign that the user is seeing something happening, but LCP is a better gauge of when the user is likely to get access to meaningful content. So to sum up, there's nothing wrong with FCP, but if you're going to focus on a single indicator, LCP is a better metric.
Thanks a lot for that answer, Sam. I think you are bang on. I think these two matrices are so complementary to each other. And I think just to add, things will keep evolving. I think Chrome team is also trying to figure out which are the best ways to probably show the best user experience and which are the right matrices to measure that. Cool. With that, can we have the next question, please? Why Lighthouse codes on page speed insights and web page test differ on similar settings? Oh, I love these kind of questions. I, as a consultant, get this question so many times. And let me put Paul on the spot right now.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to say, I think there's actually a lot of the stuff that the engineering teams are looking at the moment. There is variability between different runs as well. So you run Lighthouse once and you run Lighthouse again, and there can be different scores broadly there. I think with regard to kind of things like page speed insights and web page test, I think one of the ways I look at it is that they're set up on different pieces of infrastructure. So page speed insights runs on a Google server somewhere. And whilst it's kind of using Chrome and other methods behind the scenes to kind of work out what it can do and inspect the page, it is running on a different type of network and a different type of machine to what you might be running on locally. And it's definitely running on different types of hardware to what you would see on web page test. And so it's not just things like the network stack that is different. Web page test, runs normally on the machine or on a phone sometimes as well. inside a bank there, a bank of devices that Pat and everyone maintains on that side. And so like network speed is different, device speed is different. There is just generally a lot of variability, but that is one of those things that the engineering team is looking at quite a lot at the moment, because people have told us that variability is frustrating for them, because they've got a boss or a manager who's saying like, our lighthouse score is 75, and then one thing it's 80, like fix it. And like, I can't fix it, it's on a different machine somewhere else. And so the lighthouse teams and everyone are looking at how to reduce or improve stability of the scores just generally. On that side, I think the way that I look at it instead, and the way I use Lighthouse, because I build a lot of sites still, the way I use Lighthouse and PageSpeed Insights is I don't tend to look at the score. The score is nice on a vanity metric side of things. I tend to look at what the test results say. And so like the test results are saying, you've got blocking scripts, or you need to improve your FCP, like those types of things. Like that gives me a hint of where to go and what to look at, and that's what I use. It doesn't necessarily help you when you're trying to talk to your manager about why the Lighthouse score has changed, but that's actually how I go and choose what to investigate and where to work on and what to prioritize, instead of just looking at the raw number.
I think you were bang on that, and I think I love the part when you mentioned that I don't look at the scores, but yeah, if you don't look at the scores, your managers might ask you why the scores aren't changing. Yeah. So I think in the real world,
I know me when the scores get lower, right? So I'm probably fine to some extent.
Right. I think one thing which I generally do, just as an add-on, is to like choose WPT and choose the exactly same metrics to get a sense of whether my lighthouse is really varying a lot there or not, if I've made any improvements. But I think yes, PSI with server location not being there, like not being mentioned, it certainly can get tricky, and you can't be certain that you're using the right same configuration or not every time. Anyway, with that, can we move on to the next question? Another one on tooling. Why aren't dev tools aligned with the PSI, which is PageSpeed Insights? Maybe Jesslyn, you want to take a stab at that?
Sure. I think Paul mentioned just now, because DevTools is using Lighthouse as well. So Chrome is revisions every 6 weeks, or if you are using Canary, it actually refresh every couple of days. There are many subtle changes to many areas, such as the DevTool itself, the network stat, and also the scoring mechanism. So, but PSI, PageSpeed Insight is updated in a different pace. So this is one of the area that's different. And the other thing is the DevTool is running in local in your machine, like Paul mentioned just now. And PageSpeed Insight is a hosted service which gives you different lab result, because there's different of architectures and of the machines on it runs on and the network they use. Yeah, so that's why it's slightly different. But as Paul mentions, if try to use the DevTools and the metrics as your guidance to improve your website, maybe look less about the scoring.
Yeah, don't live by the scores. Look at how the site is actually performing. I think brilliant answer. With that, can we go on to the next question? So how should we handle Google Ads requests in optimizing Web Vitals? I'm pretty sure this is one of the publishers for sure. So Kenji, do you want to take this question?
Sure, I can give it a shot. So I think the first thing you should ask yourself is, what is your top priority? And in most cases, it should be about making sure that the user sticks around and likes the user experience so that they can come back often and build like a preference for your website. And so what this means is that the user came to your website to see content or like do something. And so you should prioritize everything that's needed to achieve that. And so everything that's needed to hit the LCP, have a good first input delay, all of that should go first. And then as the network becomes more available, you can start queuing like more kind of like ads related activities. And then the same thing goes for the main thread. After you're done using the main thread for your own purpose, you should feel free to like start getting some JavaScript activity for ads related things. In terms of like concrete things you could do, like one thing that maybe would be interesting to explore is using the user timing API, so that the team that is in charge of defining the loading experience and all of that can define like key user moment, after which like it's fine to add analytics and maybe ads, so that to make it clear to the other teams when they can use Tag Manager, at like which point can they add more things. So that's one thing we recommend is user timing and define rules so that everyone knows what they can do at which phase, and rely on this timing to conditionalize time manager script and so on. So that would be my recommendation.
Got it. I think one aspect is definitely the time that it takes. I think the other aspect is also the layout shifts and stuff like that, which can actually vary a lot depending on the ad format which you're using. So I think with the time, as the people would learn, they probably would know the right ad formats as well, which they can use to strike the right balance between getting good good conversion rates, click-through rates, and also having good website scores as well. Anyone wants to add anything before we take take another question? Any thoughts on ad types and stuff like that? I know there could be few running thoughts. If no, let's go to the next question. Cool. Okay, so this one is an interesting one. What are the different ways of authentication in clients? I think by clients, they mean on the front end, like on the mobile web app. So since this is more to do with bridging the gap between native app and web as well, because I know there are a lot of new features which Project Fugu has got us in. So Thomas, why don't you take a dig at it?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be more than happy to speak to this. So today on the web, there are absolutely several different ways to support authentication. There's, of course, the old method of just username and passwords, which can be done through something like OAuth, or the slightly newer WebAuthn API, which is great just to get that basic support going. There's, of course, also federated solutions like the login with Google, which are really great options, especially if you want to have a kind of low friction sign-in process. And then if you're interested in using phone numbers specifically and verifying that the user has the actual phone number and access to that phone number, we actually have a new Fugu API called the web.OTP API. And this will allow you to automatically read a one-time password code that is sent to the user's device automatically from your web app. And this dramatically improves the sign-up funnel and gets more users through that all-important sign-up step. And then lastly, as we're thinking about authentication, if there are people out there who are interested in understanding whether or not a user is actually real, we have something called the Trust Tokens API, which is supposed to help combat fraud and allow you to distinguish between a real human versus a bot, all without doing any unnecessary tracking.
Wow, I didn't know about trust tokens. That's pretty cool. I certainly had that question always running on top of my mind, that with these new capabilities coming into the picture, how would we really tackle those? So I think thanks for that additional tip. Awesome. So can we have the next question, please? Oh, long one. How to handle CLS for UI dependent on data that may or may not come from a client-side API call, which is conditional data? Kenji, I cannot think of anyone else to answer this.
It's a tough question, but I will do my best to provide some guidance. So, I think the name of the game is to find ways to minimize the layout shift based on the information that you have, which might not be the final information. And so, one thing you could do is you could try to compute what is the average size of the element and use that to minimize the layout shift. So if you pick a size that is going to be on average the most likely outcome, you can minimize the layout shift that way. The other way you could do is pick a middle ground, a size that is going to minimize the layout shift, whichever way it comes, as opposed to picking a too small area, and then suddenly you have a big element that comes back and everything shift around by a fair margin. So that would be one thing. And then when the element comes back with the different dimension, you actually have a couple of options. The first one is when this happens off screen, everything should be fine because Chrome has this feature called scroll anchoring, which makes sure that what is visible on the viewport stay in place, whatever happens above it. So that's the good case. The case where things are a bit tricky is when the element that changed size is on the screen and has elements below it, in which case it's going to push things out of the screen and trigger a layout shift. And so for that, you have a couple of options to look into. One would be to say, maybe this is not important to do that right away and wait until it goes off screen, so you can delay the resizing, and then the scroll anchoring feature will take care of that. So that's one option. The other one is to say, well, I'm not going to allow a resize. I would just clip the element. It depends on like what the element is about. If it's like a picture, maybe that's not what you want because your user wants to see the whole picture. But if it's like an element that is not critical to user experience, maybe that's what you want to do. You can like clip it. You can also contain it. So for instance, you could keep the element the size it has and let the user decide for himself if they want to scroll through it independently of what's on the screen. So that's one way to contain the layout shift. Another option would be to let the user decide to expand the element by touching it, for instance. You could have like an overlay that say, like expand this element to see the whole thing. Other options would be to layer it. So it's kind of hard to explain, but I'm sure you've seen this effect where when you scroll, you can see that there's an element that is like peeking as you go and lets you like kind of like see the full element as you scroll through the page. So it doesn't trigger the layout shift. It just makes the scrolling experience a little bit more involved because you have to scroll a bit more than usual, but it's a better user experience than having things moving around. And then maybe finally, one thing that people could explore is instead of having this like abrupt layout shift, you could decide that you want to animate the transition between the size that you have initially and the final size, because maybe the user annoyance is mostly about the fact that things move like suddenly out of the screen, whereas if it was like a slow animation, maybe it would be more acceptable. With that being said, we understand that this is a very challenging area, and we'd love to help you more, either like at the platform level, maybe with like better APIs, or maybe at the browser level, like we did for layout shift that occur above the screen with a feature like scroll anchoring. Maybe there are things we could do there. And so I would be more than happy to follow up offline to better understand the constraint, the use case, and explore better options.
Yeah, thanks for the detailed answer. I think that's the reason I said I can't think of anyone better than you right now to answer about this. So thanks for the details in there, and I'm sure like our partners would have tons of things to share, which we can particularly like certainly pass on to you, and have like better things at place. Anyway, can we have the next question, please? With third-party cookie blocking by default, how can I ensure my remarketing campaigns will continue to work? Yeah, something for you, Mod.
Yeah, sure. So Chrome is proposing at the moment a number of new web standards that aim to enable these advertising use cases, but in a privacy-preserving way. And one of the only proposals to cover specifically remarketing use cases is called turtle dove, like a turtle and a dove, the two animals. Turtle dove is a type of bird I didn't know before. And so this explainer is available on GitHub under the Web Incubator community group, WYCG. So you can find it over there. And the design and the discussion around this will really continue to happen in the open. So you can use the GitHub repo to really monitor progress, watch it, and get involved if you would like to contribute. Especially if you feel like there are use cases or functionality that is not covered yet, we would love to hear about it.
Awesome. Quickly, without wasting any further time, can we go to the next question, please? My Crux report FCP results seem to be inverse of my Web Vitals FCP results. Which one should I use? I think we need a bit more context here, to be honest. I think my Web Vital FCP, maybe they're referring to Web Vital JS. Paul, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I think we discussed this one. Is that I think there is more context needed at the moment because the Chrome UX report reports an aggregate, right? And so it's kind of reporting on the population of users who can report data back on that side of things, of user population of people using your site. And then the Web Vitals report is for a single user, kind of looking at FCP there and everything. And so I think there's a number of things that we'd probably have to do offline, I suppose, because it's hard to diagnose right now. where we'd actually see whether you're aggregating the numbers right. So we're presuming that Web Vitals JS, you're sending the data back and then you're aggregating it on some post process or in your own analytics. We just have to probably do a little bit more research to see whether you're actually doing the same type of aggregation that you'd see in Chrome UX report as well, because the data is segmented differently and it's done across the entire population. Well, I say the population of people who report data back on that side. So yeah, it's not an easy answer.
I think that's a great point, because I think the crux shows you the data for only the people who have opted in for sharing that data. And I think when you're using webvitals.js, you could potentially be capturing all the speed metrics data on your own. Great point there. So can we have the next question, please? Yeah, sorry.
Statistically, the population should be the same, really, like big enough samples. So we'd have to look at it a little bit more and see.
Yeah, perfect. Next question. What's the ideal way for dynamic rendering in isomorphic SPA single page? Oh, again, Paul. So what's the ideal way of dynamic rendering in isomorphic SPA with sectional pages split into lazy loaded modules? I could not think of anyone better than Paul, because you love SPAs. So what's it?
Yeah, multiplayer apps. I love them both. They're like children. You never have a favorite, right? I think the bit I was thinking about when we were looking at this question was the hard bit here is I think some of the context of this question is looking at search as well. So like dynamic rendering is a term that search team use for kind of getting things indexed as well. So the context depends, right? But I think broadly the guidance that we've got on search, and there's a link that we can share around later on the developers.google.com site as well. That kind of talks about the SEO basics, especially for using JavaScript sites. But it's broadly applicable to kind of how we're asking developers to think about building sites for users, not just for search, as well, in terms of just how do you deliver content. And so the standard things apply, like make sure that you try and kind of get content out with the first render without having to have JavaScript enabled. The reason behind that for search is that the indexing process behind it is different to how it's using a browser and everything, but it's potentially different to how you kind of like time-wise that the user might experience on the user's machine. So render as much as you can without having to have JavaScript enabled. That's always the best advice, whether you're facing whether you're targeting search or whether you're targeting like users in the browser. Focus on ensuring that you cache in. Again, like the search side of things is like a user as well. Like it will aggressively cache if needs be. Ensure that you don't have blocking resources. Ensure that your build process is chunking things up as properly as well. The JavaScript is being delivered only when you really need it. Don't load JavaScript that you don't need on the first load, because that slows everyone's experience down. If you're thinking about your SPA and then multiple navigations, you can obviously kind of prefetch if you want, but do it at a time when you're not blocking the first load. Again, it's similar stuff to what Vitals is also asking you to do as well. So it's kind of a complex list of things to follow. The guidance should be there. I would like to tell everyone to go to web.dev and look at more of the guidance there and tell people hopefully guides you through how to build a fast site. But yeah, there's a lot to kind of cover. But I think when you look at things like Vitals, you look at the search guidance, you look at all those type of things as well coming through, I think that's where you focus.
Awesome. I think, yes, the hidden message was go to web.dev to follow all these guidelines. Awesome. Cool. Next question, please. It seems that FCP data on Crux and other Google tools. Oh, similar question, I think, like before. So I think one common misconception here can be that Web Vitals is a tooling, is a tool which is reporting all those things. So I think Web Vitals are the set of metrics. I want to say that, but since I've already asked this to Paul, Sam, do you have anything to add on top of that?
Yeah, I agree. I'm not sure I entirely understand the question, but like you say, Web Vitals isn't a tool in itself, and it doesn't kind of provide FCP data. So kind of assuming the question is actually about the difference between Crux and Lighthouse. So really, that's the difference between field and lab data. Lab results will depend on the current testing context. So it's essentially, testing with a single user, whereas Crux data is gathered from real user metrics in the field. So there's always going to be a difference there. But you can use both, and just bear in mind that data from Lighthouse depends on your local environment.
Cool. Can we have the next question, please? Where are we heading to post-COVID situation? Wow, such an open-ended question. With this, I think, yeah, Paul, wanna take it up?
I can try. I think it's hard, right? I think the COVID situation has been, and it's an interesting point in the ecosystem or in the world, right? Where obviously there was a lot of lockdown in a lot of different places across the world, which meant that businesses that were traditionally offline businesses had to kind of suddenly have to work out how to go online. And so I think, when I look at it, I look at kind of, where Chrome has been going, definitely kind of more, obviously there's a lot more usage of like digital, I think is the easiest way of saying it. Standard things that everyone sees, people are saying, oh, people use Zoom or, me, I suppose we have to say that. Like, using video conferencing tools, all powered by web technology, mostly inside the browser as well. And so we're seeing kind of the same types of upticks in kind of usage across Chrome of, more media, more usage, more time, more like content creation, people using the cameras and those types of things. And so I think from our side, it's like we're in a unique position right now to kind of, from our team in particular, is to look at how you think about getting you all as developers in the ecosystem to build better experiences for your users, because you're getting more users coming onto the platform, onto the browser, onto the web, onto your sites and services. In some cases, they've never used it before as well. So it's not just businesses having to go online. It's also users having to go online as well for the very first time. And so like we just want you to kind of build fast sites that are delivered to the user nearly instantly, and then focus on the experience that you can offer as well. And so if you can take advantage of better features and more capabilities that are coming through to the browser to enhance your user's experience, we'd love to see that kind of coming through with the new situation right now.
Cool. I know we are running out of towards the end of the show, but let's take a couple of more questions. And if in case we haven't been able to answer, we are unable to answer any of the questions which you guys asked, we'll definitely make it a point that we come back to you with the answers on the page itself. So with that, can we have the next question, please? If an image is the largest content in a web page, what strategies could be applied to increase the largest contentful paint? Kenji, your favorite area.
I love coding, so. So I think the first question you should ask yourself to make your job easy is, do you absolutely need this big image? Is that absolutely important for the user, or can you do without? Because if you can do without, then it's a much simpler problem to have, right? But let's say that it is super important, and because it's so big, it's going to be the main factor that that contribute to LCP. And so you want to make sure that it's tip-top optimized, in every possible ways. So for instance, you want to make sure that the browser is going to load that image as soon as possible. So if you know right out of the bat, at the request level, that this is going to be needed, you should definitely use the link rel preload HTTP header. If you can't do that at the server level, then you could still do that within the main document. There is a link rel element that works as well. So do that, and then obviously you want to fetch something that is lean and clean, and so you want to make sure that you pick the best and the most modern format for the job. So you should look into using WebP, for instance, JPEG 2000, all of that. You want to make sure that you pick the right format for the job. And then obviously there are many ways to optimize a format, compression being one of them. So you want to make sure you pick a compression that is good on the screen and a minimize the amount of byte and you need to transfer to get that result. Obviously, sending a big image doesn't make sense if the screen doesn't really support it. So you want to pick the optimized resolution for the screen. One way to do that is to use SRC set and all of that, responsive image. And then a final thing you should ask yourself is whether or not it makes sense to have the high-res version first, or let the user decide for themselves if they want to see that and pay for the cost of waiting for it. So you could start with a decent looking low-res version and have a way for the user to see the full high-res image after a tap and transfer them into a gallery, for instance. Obviously, one more thing you should look into is if you can use a CDN to make sure that the image is transferred as the maximal speed it can be. So I guess that covers like the most important point. I believe that web.dev has like some pretty good guidance on that, and so I would recommend that folks check that page on that web.dev LCP guidance, because everything is listed over there.
Great call outs, certainly, Kenji. I think you struck the right chord by saying that whether you really need that image at first place or not. And I think even if you do, of course, there are tons of ways to optimize images. There is tons of guidance available on web.dev. There is also one images.guide. I think that's been been there in the wild since so long. So I think all those things can be used for sure. With that, maybe let's take the last question of the day. What will be major impacts of UX, performance, and web vitals in the coming future? Again, a very open-ended question. And since this is the last one, let me not put Paul again into the spot, and let's open it for everyone to answer. Whoever wants to take it, and maybe we can do a roundtable to get everyone's view on that. So, who wants to go first?
Okay, I'm happy to dive in.
Sure, Sam.
So, I mean, we're in this world where, we've got more and more people on the web who've maybe, never used a browser before, or they're just outside their normal browsing habits. So, like, I'm eternally optimistic, really. So trying to think of on the good side of all this, thinking of the unified guidance and the quality, simplified signals from Web Vitals. I would really hope that the impact is leaner, less complex code, less resource demands, and focus on user experience. So performance, accessibility, reliability, and resilience. Yeah.
Fair enough. Anyone else?
I think I would go. I would like to build on that. I feel that with the core Web Vitals metrics and this idea that we are in a good place to have user experience that are loading like faster, respond well. I'm excited about what happens next, and I feel that there is a lot of opportunities between navigations to trying to redefine how user experience the web, like trying to blur the line between the web and native through transitions, animation. And I think it's super important because you want to make sure that the user, you keep the user like attention high by loading super fast and giving them the value that they're looking for, but then also keep them engaged as they use your website or web app through a transition and animation, so that they don't have to think about what is happening. I think it's kind of like a bit sad that on the web we kind of like show how the sausage is made, as it were. And with proper animation and transition, we could hide that all away and just have experience that feels natural and not just like implementation details. So that's the area I'm most excited about in the future.
Got it. Cool. And I think since there was this UX as well there, right? And I'm sure Fugu is doing a great job. Project Fugu is doing a great job. Thomas, what's your thoughts there?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to share a little bit. So I think, first of all, when you just look at something like UX, performance, and Web Vitals, the thing that excites me about those three is the feedback loop between them. So, through Web Vitals, you'll get higher search rankings when you have a really great performance experience to better UX. That leads to users having a much better and more complete experience, and that then lets you and your teams invest more and more into this performance. And then in the end, you end up with an experience that's just really great for your users. And to that, you can, of course, add lots of great capabilities, whether that's something like WebOTP or other great features that let you really get that much deeper UX experience with your application, and then just continuing to put more of your time towards web.
Cool. I think Indian developers certainly love Fugu features. I think CDS 2019, we had so many Indian partners like implementing WebOTP, Contact Picker, and all those things. So I think definitely looking onto that, how web is becoming a better place for everyone. And with that, maybe we can end, but unless, of course, anyone wants to add anything. No? Okay, cool. Then thanks a lot for joining us in this Q&A, everyone. And yeah, I think with that, we can just go to the wrap up. Cool. And with this, we come to the most interesting part of today's session, something we all have been waiting for from past 1.5 2 hours, the end of the show. I hope I didn't see people nodding in agreement. I sincerely hope this isn't the case and you had a very nice time listening to such interesting and insightful talks from some of the top websites in India who have been able to keep pace with the latest things announced by web team at Google and in general. From getting the tough questions around privacy answered by NDTV and Times to Nyka's Common Web Vitals improvement journey. From GoIBibo coming up with their in-house optimized framework to Naukri.com raising the bar with some cool React framework performance gotchas. Today's sessions had it all, and the extensive Q&A at the end was just the perfect icing on the cake. In case there were any questions we couldn't answer during the show, we try to revert on those maybe within 2 days. That's my commitment. Cool. So there are undoubtedly a plethora of real-world learnings to take back with you and make a web better place by replicating the learnings on your websites too. We at Google are committed to help you out in the journey of creating awesomeness for users and in return your businesses as well. Watch out the web.dev space for something cool and like we are planning that will bring us even closer. More on that later. Before I sign off, a humble reminder to fill in the feedback form to appreciate our efforts and also help us improve. The feedback form is again on the right hand side. And with that, here's your host for today, Saurav Rajpal signing off for the day. Namaste, Adab, Sat Sri Akal. Thank you.